using a little ITSM tool called HP OpenView. So I was on the service desk taking calls, and I was told that the tool could do templates, but getting templates created means I have to reach out to the support team and it takes forever to get done. So I ended up writing my own auto hotkey scripts to fill out tickets to do them quicker. Now, of course, ServiceNow exposes that template functionality to users, so they don't have to necessarily go to an admin to ask them to create a template. But back then with HP OpenView, I needed to either get support to do it or do it myself for auto hotkey script. So I did that. So I had got a bit of notoriety on the service desk for being that guy that wrote auto hotkey scripts. And not long after being on the service desk, a position opened up on a application support team, the same application support team that would have created the template if I asked them to. So I went and worked for that team, and I soon discovered why they had no capacity to do things like create things like templates, because they were supporting a number of tools across a number of different customers, in which I started to support HP OpenView and CA Service Desk and HP Service Manager. So I had to have a lot of skills in different tools. I never became a master at any of them, but I had to be across them, at least at the waterline. And then we won a contract that required us to implement ServiceNow. Unfortunately, I wasn't part of that team. I was in the same building as the team that was implementing and supporting it. And they just seemed a lot more happier with their job. They seemed less stressed. And I started to get interested into what ServiceNow was. And I was lucky enough to be sent on a implementation boot camp where I'm from Perth, Western Australia, on the west side of Australia. So my company sponsored us all to go do this training. There was a group of 4 of us that all went over and did this implementation boot camp. And that was kind of where you could almost say that I fell in love with ServiceNow. After that, that's all I wanted to do with my career. And not long after that, a position opened up at our customer that was using ServiceNow. And I joined the team as part of their enhancement release lifecycle, creating enhancements. So I got to go straight into the dev work, initially at least, and then they were working on a Service Catalogue project. And I helped test, because I was too junior then to actually do any of the development, but I was just a all hands on deck tester for that one. So that kind of started my journey into testing as well, that I'm going to be talking about in detail today when it comes to my presentation. So yeah, that's pretty much my journey of how I got into ServiceNow, from humble service desk beginnings to ServiceNow developer.
Yeah, that sounds like a long journey with different tools. And yeah, I've heard similar stories from HP to ServiceNow. And yeah, you've got lots of experience now. Okay, great. So what excites you more about the future of ServiceNow?
Oh, as I was saying, I started as a user of HP OpenView that was really just a ITSM tool. And ServiceNow also started as just being an ITSM tool, but now it's branched out into IT operations management with tools like Discovery, Service Watch, Service Mapping, event management, all kinds of stuff in that space, into customer service management, HR service delivery, and just enterprise service management in general. And they're just going into more and more industry verticals, and there's just so much opportunity to use ServiceNow and adopt it across businesses internationally. So it's just incredibly exciting how ServiceNow just keeps growing beyond my expectations.
Yep, agree with you on that. The future is very fast, and I can see it's expanding also. Yep. Okay, so can you name someone who has motivated you in the ServiceNow community and who you would suggest to our audience today?
Yeah, it's hard to name just one person, so I'll name 2 people that kind of helped me along my journey, particularly in the MVP space. So in 2016, I was quite fortunate to go to Knowledge 16 back when the conferences were in person. So this was in Las Vegas, where I also was able to present on testing, which I thought I was incredibly surprised that I got accepted, but it was just about taking every opportunity that came my way and not letting any of them pass by, and just capitalizing on that again and again and again. And while I was there, I bumped into a gentleman called Michael Fry. He's been a community MVP, I think, pretty much every year for the past 5 years, including this year as well. And he was wearing a MVP polo shirt. And I thought, wonder if I could be a MVP one day. That seems kind of cool. And eventually kind of worked my way up to becoming a community MVP in 2020 and also this year as well. And then near the end of last year, well, this is the second year they've had the developer MVP program that Alikutty's also a part of. I noticed some people that were community MVPs were also developer MVPs, and I'd never heard of it before. And I started looking at these people. I did notice that Alikutty was Australian. I was like, oh, there's some Australian representation in here. That's cool. If he can do it, I can do it too. There was another gentleman called Mark Roothoff, who is very prominent on the community forum. I think he's created over 100 blogs. It's absolutely crazy. But he's got so much incredible content. I saw he was a developer MVP. And I thought, I wonder if I can aim to get there as well. And they opened it up to applications this year. And I applied, and they thought I was worthy to get in. And now I'm an MVP member as well. So there has been many people along the way that's inspired me. Some I've worked with in the past, but these, I guess, the two big names I'd say in the MVP sphere would be Michael Fry and Mark Roothoff.
Okay.
And Alikutty as well, of course.
Thanks for that. Yep. So I've seen Mark. He's been very active in the community. I think he has written over 150 plus blogs over the past 2 years, I guess. Keeping up lots of content. Okay, that's great. So what's the best advice that you would give to our audience today, or any new freshers that we have?
Yeah, well, talking about the community, it's kind of how I built my skills quickly as well. I just went on the community all the time and treated it as training. Basically, I would just look at the front page and see what problems other people are having and try and learn from those problems, and to stop those problems from surfacing at my own customers. And then I started to see questions. I'm like, oh, I actually know the answer to that. And then started answering questions. And then I started to kind of challenge myself to kind of speed code when people would say, I need a script to do this. And I'll just quickly try and do up a script and just write up a script quickly and try and be the first person to post it to get more points, to get up the leaderboard. So it really turned into a game. And as I did at university, I used to be really, really bad at finding bugs in code. And it was a weak spot of mine. I knew I needed to grow in that space. So I practiced that on the community. You'd get a lot of people that would just post this block of code and say it doesn't work. And that's all they would give you. So you really have to look quite hard to see what's there. And I've gotten quite good at looking at code and being able to tell what's wrong straight away. So it's just about practice. So the community is just such a great resource. None of the other tools had anything like it. And it's not just ServiceNow, the tool itself, the community and the resources are incredible, especially as well. You've got the community and then you've got the developer website, which has lots and lots of applications that people have uploaded on the share portal. So sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just go there, and some people have written some pretty good stuff, especially as a developer. There's lots of great developer utilities there. There's API documentation. One of the other bugbears I had with other tools I worked on was the API documentation was non-existent, or if it was there, it was out of date and unreliable. whereas the ServiceNow developer API is usually pretty spot on. I don't think I've ever really had issues finding things that don't work as they're documented. It's usually a case of if they're documented, they work well. So there's just so much resources out there. The barrier to entry into the ServiceNow industry, I think, is quite low, given how much free resources there are. You can request your own developer instance. There's lots of guides on the developer page that you can follow yourself to learn how to build apps and configure all aspects of the tool. It's really quite incredible. So that would be my two kind of top points for people wanting to get into ServiceNow is community and the developer portal. Just amazing resources.
Great. That's really good advice that you could share with the audience. And just one point to add here, ServiceNow themselves motivates many of their MVPs, right? Even if you just open the high support portal today, you can see that the first they have a sentence like you can open a post in a community instead of opening a ticket here. That's how they put the focus on community, and also this same focus on the MVPs as well. So the motivation is too good from the side of ServiceNow. Okay. And yeah, thank you, Paul, for answering these questions. So next we'll be having a session from Paul, and he would be presenting on how to create ATF tests for Service Catalog. Over to you, Paul. You can start with your session. Thanks.
Yep, cool. Just let me set this all up. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, we can see.
And the presentation?
Yes.
All right, I won't spend too long on about me because we've kind of already covered this off. What you may not have known is my hobbies. I'm not just a ServiceNow automaton. I do other things. I enjoy running. I go for a run every Saturday morning and usually during the week as well. And I've been learning piano. I started right about when I started in ServiceNow, so about 8 years ago as an adult. It's just really good to kind of clear your mind and focus on something else that's not ServiceNow. So, and you guys pretty much already know everything from the other introductions as well. So to start off with, as I mentioned before, I'm from Perth. And although we're the most isolated city in the world, we still were impacted by COVID. Lots of people have been experienced COVID in different ways. Some people have lost family members in this pandemic. But we've been extremely lucky in Perth. I think in Perth, we're probably one of the luckiest places in the world. We've only had 2 lockdowns during this whole time. I understand some places are still in lockdown, like many places in India. We're just so thankful to live in Perth. But it's still being in that isolated city where we only had 2 lockdowns did mean that we were very unprepared when we did have to go into lockdown. So when COVID first hit, there was a big lockdown and there was kind of a bit of a build up. People knew it was coming, people could get prepared. And then when that lockdown ended, everything in Perth pretty much went back to normal and life was just completely normal. And then one day on a Sunday afternoon in January, all having a good time relaxing at home, a press conference came up and head of state announced to the state that we were entering a 5-day lockdown and we had 5.5 hours to prepare for it. No one was to go to work on Monday through to Friday. Everyone would have to work from home unless they were an essential worker. And this really took us by surprise. Many people ran to work to try and get their laptops so they could work effectively from home, and others rushed to the shops to stock up on toilet paper. Luckily for me, I had a bidet, so if I ran out of toilet paper, I would have been fine. Many people here probably already work from home, but in government, it was usually policy to go into the office. So a lot of people didn't have access to systems remotely, so they needed remote access. And that's what happened to one of our customers. Not everyone got remote access during the first lockdown. Some people had it, but it expired. So suddenly you've got entire departments, hundreds of people that just can't do their job without remote access. They've got ServiceNow, but unfortunately, they didn't have a service catalog yet. In fact, they were in the middle of implementing a service catalog. So their two communication channels were either email or phone. So very quickly on Monday, the service desk call volume went up 4 times the normal volume. So you can imagine you'd call service desk and there would just be, you'd be in line waiting for hours. So that wouldn't work. You could email in, but the same issue would arise. And not only that, the approval process attached to getting remote access was very, very high up the chain. So these high up resources were swamped with approval requests, which were either mostly by email because they didn't have a service catalog. It was just absolute chaos and many people couldn't do their job. So it's very important in this day and age, not just to have a service catalog, but have a service catalog that works, because a service catalog that doesn't work is just as valuable as not having a service catalog at all. So testing in ServiceNow. ServiceNow has best practices on pretty much everything these days, including testing. And the best place to get those testing best practices is in the Customer Success Center. It's always a good idea to get an understanding of what the best practices are before you start executing in ServiceNow. So at a high level, ServiceNow defines 3 types of testing in its best practice. Unit testing, which is the testing of individual features or small components. System testing, which is testing the system works and functions as a whole. And user acceptance testing, which is when the user signs off on particular functionality. ServiceNow recommends you do all those different types of testing. And it's also incorporated into their Now Create methodology, which is the current implementation methodology that ServiceNow recommends you use for all projects. Testing is mentioned quite a lot in that project methodology as well. And that's all on the Customer Success Center, which can be seen in the link below on that slide. So what testing tools are available to us on the platform? ServiceNow has 2 main notable applications. The first one is called Test Management. This is for manual testing. It lets you create tests and test sets that staff can execute against themselves, where they manually go through test steps and they tick off whether something has passed or whether something hasn't passed, which can then go into defect management. And you need to check your entitlement as to whether you have test management or not available to you. Then there's the automated test framework, which is a part of the core platform. Everyone's entitled to this, no matter what product you're on. Let's just look a little deeper into what ATF can actually do for us. So there's ATF, this automated testing framework. You might be asking yourself, why should we do automated testing in the first place?
Paul, you're actually on mute. I'm not sure what's happened. Can everybody
Yeah.
else?
Hello?
Yeah, I think now we can hear.
Hello?
No, we lost you and you're sort of cutting out a bit.
Okay. See what I can do.
Whilst Paul is sorting out that headphone issue, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat and we'll make sure to answer them at the end after Paul has finished his presentation. So keep them in the chat and we'll come back to you.
Hello? Can you hear me still?
Yes, now you're great.
Okay, that was weird. I heard the mute sound in my headset, but it didn't say I was on mute in Zoom.
Oh dear. All right, back to your presentation. Sorry to interrupt you.
So yeah, that was weird. No thanks. I wouldn't have been sure otherwise. So firstly, automated testing saves time in the long term, as once you've created a test once, you can re-execute it over and over again a lot quicker than it would be to run that test manually. Secondly, it allows you to increase the test coverage of the tests that you create because you can automate all of them. You can execute more of them quicker, so you can cover more stuff quicker. Thirdly is for improved accuracy. Sometimes when, well, just like anything, humans aren't infallible and they sometimes make mistakes when they're testing. And sometimes even they might forget to record results or forget to submit results or anything like that. With ATF, the results of all your tests are recorded in ServiceNow forever if you want, or for a certain period of time. So, and they're always accurate. They're always recorded in the same way every time, eliminating human error. Fourth is the productivity improvement. Once you've automated all your tests, or at least some of your tests, you can run them on demand and get that feedback much quicker than needing to engage with a tester and then have the tester do the testing and then record the results and send it back to you. And fifth, quite an important point, it doesn't eliminate manual testing, it strengthens it because it allows testing to be focused on the things that only humans can do. Sometimes humans have a real sense of something, whether it works or doesn't work, even if it technically ticks all the boxes. Things like cosmetic issues or user experience that automated testing just simply can't test for. So hopefully I've convinced you all why automated testing is a good idea, and I'll continue to talk about the automated test framework, a bit of its history to start off with. So back in 2017 on Istanbul version, it was released and it does what it says it does. It allows for the automatic execution of tests. Part of the platform, no additional subscription is required. As the platform has grown, ServiceNow has started to ship new products with ATF tests as well. So as you configure the platform to the business needs, you can validate that the out-of-the-box functionality still behaves as intended by running these what they call quick start tests out of the box. And if you have modified the system, you can just modify those out-of-the-box tests to realign with your environment. This is quite handy for people that are upgrading to Quebec. And they can be scheduled as well or run on demand. So you can pile up all your system testing to occur in the middle of the night and come into the office the next day and find your defects. And it's also helpful for testing, I guess, compatibility in different web browsers. You can choose to run tests in, say, Chromium or Edge or Mozilla, any browser of your choice, to make sure that all your client-side stuff works across all the web browsers that are supported in the standard operating environment. So what will it test exactly? It can't test absolutely everything, but with every release of ServiceNow, its capability in what it can test just keeps expanding. Some of the basic stuff that you would expect is testing forms. can test the state of forms. And by the state, I mean like whether fields are read-only, mandatory, if they're visible, if they're hidden, etc. It can detect the visibility of buttons on forms like UI actions, whether they're visible or not. Whether records exist, it can do lookups for particular records, make sure they exist, make sure they have certain values. They can test Service Catalogue and Service Portal and Service Catalogue in Service Portal, which is what I'm going to demonstrate today, as it's very topical in these pandemic times when everyone's working from home, and sometimes it's the only way they can engage with services. It can also do some other stuff like working with REST APIs and general server-side logic and code testing. And recently they've introduced the ability to test emails as well. So you can check that emails are sent and test subjects and recipients and that kind of thing. So it's pretty cool. There's not much left that it can't do in its current state. It's really matured a lot over time. So just to show what a test looks like in ATF, it's essentially just a collection of steps executed in a sequenced order to validate system behavior. So on the left, I've got the view of a test, and in test steps, it just has a list of test steps which just validate system behavior. So the example there, it's pointing at set field values. So what it can do here is on a particular record, it can populate a record based on certain values that you insert within ServiceNow using the same ServiceNow user interface. And then you can execute that test and it will run through those test steps and validate the behavior that you've populated in there. There's also the concept of test suites, which allows you to hierarchically execute tests. So you can have a test suite that contains some tests, and then you can have a test suite that contains a test suite and a test, or a test suite that contains a combination of all those things. So you can kind of come up with suites for particular purposes. Like if you were making a change to a catalog item, for example, maybe you want to, or a common variable set in a catalog item, perhaps you want to test your entire suite of Service Catalog items to make sure that you haven't broken anything in them as well. So what we're really here, or what I'm here to show you today, there's so many different ways ATF can be used, but going back to the story at the start, I'm going to focus on Service Catalog, as that's what the largest user base of ServiceNow is going to be using. That's where the largest impact is going to be if something goes wrong, especially in these pandemic times where we've never been more reliant on a Service Catalog. So you can test the ordering of catalog items, the population of those forms, the variables within there, and all the variable values and the states, which I'm going to show right now.
Just before you jump on, we do have one question from Ankit. How has ATF matured? How ATF has matured according to ServiceNow releases?
Yeah, so it has, the core of what it does has mostly stayed the same. It's just over time, they've introduced more and more things that you can test on. So to start off with, it was pretty much just testing forms exclusively. And then they introduced the ability to test custom UI components that you can create through Service Portal, then the ability to test in Agent Workspace as an example. And recently they've brought on the ability to test emails. They've also added the ability to test tests based on like data load sheets. So you can put in like a CSV of different users, for example, or different assignment groups, and then it will go and run the test for as many rows as you have, feeding in all that data. So that's just on the top of my head. It's gonna keep getting bigger and better. It's not going anywhere. ServiceNow are really promoting it. and there's usually fairly significant improvements with each release. So it's worth investing in that area. Cool.
Thank you.
So I'm going to demonstrate how you would create a test for a catalog item in ServiceNow using the example of requesting remote access. So just to start off with, I'll just make this a little bigger on each side. So on the left-hand side here, I'm going to create a test. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to keep the form open as a reference because I'm creating a test on the form rather than having to keep switching back and forth to remember what the form looks like. This is generally how I would create my tests. If I were to be creating them manually, I would do it this way. So it's a good kind of way to start. Otherwise, it gets very fiddly while you're creating your tests. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to create a test. Here, we'll just call this order request remote access. Save that record. And you'll see the test step section is empty at the moment. You can make it a lot quicker to create tests if you use test templates. I've created these myself. They're just a scaffolding of test steps that get pre-generated based on the templates you've created. So I've pre-created a template specifically for Service Catalogue and Service Portal. So I picked that template and it asked me to pick a catalog item that I'm ordering. So we'll go request remote access. Click add, and it's created the test steps here for me that I would ordinarily go through if I was ordering a catalog item. It starts off with what user am I ordering it as? What's the item? Populate the form with values. Validate that the form has been populated with those values. Do some state validation, checking fields are mandatory and whatnot, and then ordering the catalog item. So I usually go through and do it manually first just to make sure it makes sense. This is an item I've already created. I've assumed it already works to the specs, and I'm essentially mapping out the current state, the correct state in ATF to use this as a regression test. So if this item changes in future and becomes non-functional, this test will pick it up. But for now, I'm just validating the current system behavior, assuming that it's correct. So just as an example for requesting remote access, you might, well, firstly, as I was saying, it's important to test as the appropriate user. So impersonating an end user. There's no point testing something as a system admin when realistically no one is going to be completing a form as a system admin in the real world. Generally, they're going to be, you want to test as the kind of lowest common denominator, which is the end user in this case. So they might come in, populate VPN and RDP. They can request a hard token or a soft token. If it's a hard token, it needs to be delivered somewhere. If it's a soft token, it doesn't. So you've got a field there that disappears and one that shows that's mandatory. Just put in delivery here. So that's pretty straightforward to populate this form. Now I'm going to come and populate the test. Got the impersonate step. Type in end user. Update that. So that's going to kick off the test using the end user. It's the same impersonation function that's in the tool. Open a catalog item, that's pre-populated. Set variable values. So just like you would populate a template in ServiceNow, type in VPN, VPN true, RDP true, token type hard, delivery notes. Delivery, just as we have on the right-hand side here. update it, validate variable values. So what we'll do here as an example, we can just check that the line manager field is filled with many. So I can just type line manager is many. And lastly, variable state validation. Let's just check the things that are different from normal, like mandatory, for example, and read only. So we've got mandatory delivery notes, IDP, race 4, token type VPN. Read only is the line manager. Just quickly double check this. Looks good. Confirm the following variables are mandatory, delivery notes, IDP, raised for token type VPN. All right, so let's run this test. So running this test is just going to automatically populate the form. And along the way, it's going to be constantly checking what I've set up in the test steps. So come in here, populate options, check that everything is mandatory that should be, check that line manager is appropriately populated, and order it. And looks like it's finished. All passed. Fantastic. So that's what it looks like.
Enable services professional skills kada.
We
sorry guys,
Might
can we just make
mute
sure
there.
దాన్ని నన్ను ఇన్వైట్ చేశారు.
Sorry, let me just find out who that might be.
లేదు చూస్తూ నేను యాక్చువల్లీ ATF చేస్తా.
There we go.
Fantastic. So we've got that to pass. I'll just quickly show what happens if something goes wrong and the test might fail. So I was saying at the start, a catalog item that's non-functional is just as good as one that doesn't exist in the first place. So let's just go into this catalog item and break something. So perhaps I ordered a hard token, and in the delivery notes, I needed to specify not to deliver it to my primary home address. Maybe I wanted it delivered to an alternative because I wasn't living at that home address at the time. So let's just remove the condition on the existing UI policy, save it, go back to the half view. So now what it's doing is it's always going to hide the delivery notes. So for someone that for whatever reason can't get a soft token and put a hard token, they weren't prompted to put in the delivery notes. So it might not have even occurred to them that they needed to specify that their primary address isn't suited and the hard token goes to their primary address. The item may as well not exist because their outcome of getting remote access just isn't met. So testing is quite important. We can go back to the test I had opened just before, just looking at the history. Going back to the test, I'm just going to re-execute it and show you that it will fail. So this is the test runner here. It's going to open that record, open the catalog item, tells you what it's doing as well, setting the field values, running variable value, is taking a screenshot, finish text execution. So it didn't finish the test because it's detected a failure. And you can go over the result here. So as I was saying about accuracy, those results are logged in great detail with exactly what went wrong. And there's a screenshot there as well with all the statistics that you could possibly want to show that that's failed. So you can see there in the screenshot that the delivery notes is missing. So perhaps I picked that up before a change went to production and we were able to prevent this issue from happening in production, which is always a good outcome. So I'm just going to go and fix that defect for the next part of the demo. So that was token type. So when token type is soft, we want delivery notes to not be visible. And then we can refresh that there. And we can check our test. And this time I'm sure it will pass again and we're all good. It does it fairly quickly as well. Probably quicker than a human ordinarily would. And it looks like it succeeded 100% that time. So that's absolutely fantastic. So that's a vanilla ATF out of the box, what it looks like. Now there's some of you may or may not be familiar with a popular internet meme called the big brain meme that shows someone using only a small part of their brain doing one particular task. And then as they do more and more advanced tasks, they start using more and more of their brain until it's lighting up at the end like a Christmas tree. So I make the parallel with this to testing. I know when a lot of people start off their journey in ServiceNow, they're just excited to be developing enhancements and they just want to deploy lots of cool stuff to prod. Maybe they don't do testing. That's like not using much of your brain. And as they learn more, after all, the brain is plastic, they might start testing before deploying to production. And the next step is starting to use ATF to do that testing before going to production. And the final step, real big brain thinking, is automating the creation of ATF tests. And that's been a hobby project of mine over the last few years that I'd like to share with you guys today. I made an application called Regress that converts the form state and the actions that you take when submitting the form into test steps, which are added to a recording test. There's some additional functionality in there as well. There's the ability to test different levels. Like you can put a exhaustive mode on, which tests absolutely everything, every form button that's visible, every possible form button that could be there, test that it isn't there. Same with fields, make sure every field is visible, not visible. It just takes a snapshot of that form, everything that I manually populated before, and it just automatically puts it into the test, eliminating the need to manually go through and create those test steps in the first place. And it's a tool there simply to complement ATF and make it easier for people to create tests, especially regression tests to baseline systems. Very, very useful for people that want to upgrade and they don't have ATF tests at the moment. They can use this tool to make a baseline of their current environment quickly, then do an upgrade, then re-execute the tests. So part 2, I'm going to show you the same item, but how we can automatically generate tests using the app that I built, just to show you some of the cool stuff that you can do in ServiceNow. It's a very flexible platform. So I'm going to go to the back end here, just as a system administrator, to kick off this ATF recording tool. So just impersonating here, loading, loading, loading. I talked about having different recording options. Today, I'm just going to pick the simple option, which just does the basic checks, pretty much the same kind of checks I went through before when I manually created the test. So it's now recording. I can come back to my service catalog and impersonate our end user again. Always test as end users when you're testing your service catalog. So there's just a message prompt there telling me that it's recording. On the left-hand side, I'm going to open up the test. So it's gone and automatically generated this test. It's telling me when I've started and what version I was on when I did the recording, which can be useful for later. So I'm just going to come in and populate this form as I did before. VPN, RDP, going to check both of those. Delivery notes, please do not deliver to my primary address. Send to 123 Easy Street. Can even put in a business justification, working from home. Hit request. Now I'm going to come over here to the left. And like magic, it's populated everything that I just did. The impersonation, the variable values, validating that line manager is manager, and the variable state validation, just the mandatory and the read only, and that it's ordered it. So I can go a little deeper as well. Let's say that I want to test this process end to end, even including approvals, for example. So let's impersonate Manny. Let's just get that ticket reference number. Let's say that Manny is someone that works in the back end of the tool. They're a manager, but they might also action request items, so they're familiar with this interface. They can open up the request item here. You can see this is the one that I'd ordered, and they can just save the record just to take a snapshot of the current state of that record. You can see there it's automatically generated some test steps. So in the back end, you've got the UI actions. So it's automatically gone and detected which UI actions were visible at the time. So if something goes wrong with that in the future, this test will pick it up. And it's automatically detected the appropriate field state. It knows, picked up that number, open bind stage were all read only, and it's also picked up the variable state validation within that variable section as well. And it knows that I clicked save. It's picked that up as well. So I can then continue to the approval record, and you could do this all manually, but it takes more time. A tool like this makes it all a lot quicker. Let's say approved. Hit approve. And come here again. And it's automatically recorded what I've done. That I've opened a existing record, an approval record. It's done some UI action checks on it. It knows that I put approved in there. And not only that, it's recognized that the approval record was related to the request item as well. So that's something you can do in ATF, is open records based on outputs of previous test steps, which makes it a lot easier to go through and create your end-to-end kind of cases here. So for example, approval 4 is the same record that UI action was clicked from. That is an output of that step. So you can do things like that to chain steps together, like completing a workflow in ServiceNow. So the record's approved now. There's a task here. We can come in, we could change the priority if we wanted. We can assign it to someone. Let's just say ITIL user as an example. Click close task. We've got even more results here now. You can see that I've clicked close task. It's just done the basic kind of validation steps that you would ordinarily probably run through if you were testing this process end to end. Now there's another task. This time, maybe we can just manually change it to close complete and click save. So it's going to go and add those again to the test. step 31, you can see this time it's picked up save and that I've put in close complete. I could navigate back to the request item, open that up, just do a final check on this one. Go save. And it's gone back to the request item. It's done the field state validation, the variable state validation, and the UI actions again, and notice I've clicked save. And I can run this test. I'll just stop recording first. And it will go and essentially repeat what I just did. All that stuff there. While it's constantly checking the field states, checking that I've requested it successfully, taking screenshots along the way. It'll come through, open the request item. Go through, do the checks. Next, it will open up the approval record. And here you can see it's going through all the steps. So if anything changes along the way in the system, it will get picked up in a test. You generally don't want to put too much detail in your test. Otherwise, the smallest of changes might result in a fail in your test. That's why I tend to usually go with just checking things that deviate from normal, like fields that are mandatory or fields that are read-only, rather than checking is every field visible, because that's just too much detail and it will take you forever to populate it manually. But when it's automated like this, at least it's fairly quick and it will keep going through. So you could do this with change records as well. For example, it's an important process that you might want to test end to end to make sure that's always working, especially during upgrade time. And I think that should wrap up that test. 100, 100, 100. Just doing some final checks there. And it's done. So at the end of the test, ATF feature is to roll back everything that you've done so it doesn't populate your database with junk test data. It cleans up after itself, which is quite nice.
So Paul, there's a couple of questions in the chat. Are you able to see the chat or do you want me to read them out to you?
Yeah, I'll get you to read them out because I've only got 2 monitors.
Sure. So there are a lot of functionalities which we can't perform by ATF, like color verification on a form. Use the test data of one test script to another test script, etc. Do we have any way to add those features in upcoming releases?
Yes, that is, ATF is still on a journey, and I must admit, one thing it doesn't do well at the moment is passing data or outputs from one test to another test. I haven't really ventured into building a utility to do that specifically. My utility, I guess, is more focusing on trying to make it quicker to write tests. And before I was talking about community, on the ServiceNow community, there is an idea portal. And that's probably a really good suggestion. If it's not already up there on the idea portal, you can go to the community. If you've got an account, there's an idea portal where you can suggest enhancements to the platform. And that is a bit of a bugbear of mine as well, that you still can't kind of chain tests with inputs or outputs of one test going into another test. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you yet, other than participate in the platform ecosystem and try and guide the direction of the tool if you can.
That was a good question from Tara. We've got one from Ankit here. What all limitations of ATF exists currently? What are the limitations of ATF that exist currently?
Well, it's hard to address what the limitations are exactly. I would just say it can only test as much as there are test steps to create. So if I'll just go back to the test and just show you kind of the breadth of the test steps that are available at the moment, just to give you a bit of a feel. So you can do application navigator testing. You can do custom UI testing, although it does take a lot of effort to get this set up. I'm not convinced yet personally that it's worth the investment. Every customer and every instance is different. Perhaps there is a scenario for it. Recently, the email testing, validating outbound and inbound email. The form stuff I showed you before, you can do forms in Service Portal, lists and related lists as well, visibility of reports, dashboards, REST server, Service Catalogue, and a Service Catalogue in Service Portal. So it's kind of constrained to the test steps that they make available. It's hard. I wouldn't say there's a defined list of limitations. It's more, there's a list of features of what ATF can do at the moment. And it doesn't completely replace all testing. It just replaces a fair chunk of it, and more as they keep evolving the product over time. Were there any other questions?
There absolutely are. So how much effort do you generally need to put into the management of ATF test cases once they are in place? E.g., you selected manager as a hard value. What if manager changes?
Yeah, that's also a good question. You can make your tests a bit more robust when you set them up. So I guess as an example on this one, even for impersonation, you can instead of creating a impersonation test step, you can do a create a user test step instead. You can put this at the very start, at the beginning, and this will create a temporary kind of throwaway user based on the roles that you want to test. So if you wanted to test an end user, you would just have no roles at all. And then you can also select it to impersonate, say end user. So I guess as an example, that's one way that you can make your test more data driven. You can do record lookups and then check values based on that record lookup. So where I've got the validate the manager field, what I could do as an example, I could say raised for is the user that I created when I impersonated. And then you don't have to worry about that test user being deleted or not being available in other systems. And you can do something similar with the manager as well, where you can look up the manager record and then pass it in as an input to that validation check. And I would say it probably is a good practice to build your tests that way, so they're more robust and more maintainable over time. So there are some approaches to that.
A couple more questions. What is the best practice for maintaining these completed status ATF update sets? Is it preferred to enable in non-prod environments, and once in clone, everything will be erased?
So generally, I would recommend tests are supposed to follow the same kind of life cycle, I guess, as enhancements that go into the system. You would never run ATF in production. You would run it in the sub-production environments, but you do, the tests that you create and modify are added to update sets automatically. So you just put them in update sets and you move them across with your release. And then when you eventually clone back through all your environments, your tests will be in production and they'll come back into development if you've moved them with your enhancements. If that makes sense.
I'm sure it does to
Yeah.
more people than myself. Ankit's asked, how is regress different from test step templates?
Okay, so these test templates, they only populated the test steps. So I can just add one. Just add one to the end of it. We'll do another. Let's do Service Catalogue. Again, let's just do the request remote access. So I think that will add it on to the end of it. So I guess regress, it's similar to the test templates because it actually technically works off the back of using test templates. So the regress recorder, it will find an appropriate test template based on what you're doing. And then it will go through each one of these and automatically fill in the details within them. So I've created a template here, but everything except the open catalog item is empty. I have to go in and populate the user manually. I'd have to come in here and select the service portal if it was a different service portal. The variable values that I'm populating, they would all have to be done manually. So it's kind of that next step of automation. I hope that answers that one.
So there's another one here. You might be able to help me understand this a bit better. There is a feature of rollback in ATF. If any point of moment the network is down, then the rollback action is not performed by ATF. In this case, what is the best way to remove, delete the records created by ATF scripts?
Well, I guess that can happen. It actually hasn't happened to me before, but you would never run ATF in production. So if on the odd occasion ATF doesn't clean up properly for whatever reason, it's not really a massive deal. I usually wouldn't worry about cleaning it up. It's such a rare occurrence. And again, you never run this in production. So
that would probably cover that.
It mitigates the risk, I guess, of there being data that doesn't get cleaned up.
Okay. Shailesh has asked, after you finish, please also comment on testing optimization using ATF.
I might need a little more detail on optimization.
Shailesh, could you offer us a bit more information if you're there? Nope, it's gone quiet.
Yeah.
We've scared him off.
Okay, cool. I don't have much left in the presentation. I'll just kind of wrap it up and then we can deal with any other outstanding questions, I guess, from there. So I'm just going back to the original story about poor government customer of mine that was caught off guard. Sometimes things move quite slowly in government and they still haven't quite yet gone live with the service catalog, but we're ready to go live any day now. And even though we are about to go live, funnily enough, the remote access request wasn't prioritized for the first release. Being mindful, this project actually started 9 months ago before remote access was actually a big deal. It wasn't something that was requested that often before, but now it's something that is requested a lot. So they're still going through their journey. Most of the catalog testing for them was done manually. However, we did use Regress. There's probably a lot of developers in the room that might be wondering, I'm not a tester, what can I get out of ATF? And my primary use of it is to test complex deployments. So for example, using Regress, once you've built your functionality, you essentially are snapshotting it in Regress, taking a point in time of how that functionality works. And then when you deploy your update set to tests, you've got your tests that come with it, and you do your deployment, and then you run all your tests, and it will immediately highlight anything that didn't come across. As a developer, I couldn't count on my hands and my feet and my colleagues' hands and feet how many times I've deployed an update set and something's been missing. And then I've had to go back to the development environment and do it again. And sometimes it takes a while. You won't notice that something's missing until testing happens, or maybe you'll never notice until it's in production and someone raises an incident. So it's quite useful for deployment testing as a developer. So I'd say the customer's not quite at the big brain level, but the whole part of the brain meme is that the brain is plastic and it can change and grow over time. So, and that speaks to your whole ServiceNow journey, wherever you are, whether you're only just starting or whether you're a seasoned expert. There is so much to learn, and you can learn at any age, really. And I've seen some people pick up ServiceNow really quickly, where they've got that motivation and desire to learn. So just bring it all back to why do automated testing in the first place. Some takeaway points. There is a lot that you can test automatically, but sometimes there is a bit of an overhead to set up the automated testing in the first place. So firstly, you've got to focus on what's important. The example I gave, remote access, is pretty damn important at the moment. And that's things like that is really what you want to focus on testing first, especially if you're new to the automated testing journey. Focus on what's important at the start and then go from there. Secondly is to leverage whatever tools you can that ServiceNow offer you to automate tests more effectively. So before I built, or while I was building this Regress tool, another thing I built was a utility to copy test steps into other tests. It's not quite having test outputs going into another test, but if I wanted to reuse 50% of a test in another test, but slightly deviate it, I created a tool to copy those test steps out into the other test, just to make it much easier to reuse the same logic. And also going back to the big brain theme is just to think big wherever you are on your journey. When I first started as a developer, I didn't think that I would ever be speaking at conferences or being part of the MVP program, but I just kept that big thinking in mind and was able to surprise myself where I ended up on that journey. So you might be wondering, where can I get this tool? It's been a hobby project of mine that I've just done on weekends when I've been motivated, and it's kind of kept my development skills sharp. So I've got it available on the developer share site. So all you need to do is go to developer.servicenow.com, and there's a search bar. If you just type in Regress and scroll through the search results, you can find it. It's probably a bit easier than copying this link that's not particularly intuitive or memorable. So yeah, watch this space as to what happens with this tool going forwards.
So there's a couple of people that are saying it looks really good. They're looking forward to being able to share it, try it, jump on the store and have a look at it at its utility. Two more questions, or sorry, just one more question. How to test emails in ATF with Regress recording? Yes,
so that's not currently something that is released as part of the app. It is in my development pipeline, and I have started some early prototyping, enough to tell you that it is possible. And I had planned to release it in such a way that it gets it any record that you touch while you're recording your test, at the end, it will just check the email log table for all the emails that were sent out and just automatically populate them as test steps. So watch this space.
Very good. Okay. Does anyone else have any more questions? That's some really good questions from the crowd. Anyone else? I think you've eloquently answered everything, Paul.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you, Paul. It was really interactive. That's why people loved it. So many questions I have not seen the last time. So this was really making people be focused on what you were telling. Really informative. Thank you so much. And thank you, audience, for asking such brilliant questions. So time for the second quiz. Be ready with your phone.
All right, guys. It's going to be a different code this time. So grab your phones. The code is on the screen and I'll just add it to the chat. Just give me a moment. Can you guys see the screen? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. You're also chatty tonight. All right, here we go. So to get in again, just a reminder, go to menti.com, menti.com, and add in the presenter code, which is in the top right-hand corner. Don't forget to add your name so we know who's going to win this one. Okay, Ali, just give maybe one more minute to get people to join in.
Yep. Just like you can also take it from the web also, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have a mobile, you can join in on the web.
19. Count is increased. 20 people joined. Oh, wow.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, so you have the first question. So where do you find the best practices for ServiceNow testing? This is based on the session today, which Paul had taken. So let's see how many of you have listened to it. Okay, time's up. Okay, the right answer is
no.
they might have missed that.
The trick one. It was a trick one.
Okay.
Must be a good question then if it really challenged people.
Okay, you have the we have Amar who is on top right now. Ankit is second. Okay, we have the next question, which is also from the topic for today, from Paul's slides. So select the two tools that are available on ServiceNow platform to assist with testing. You have 4 options. Okay. Okay.
Not so tricky, this one. People got that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of those other questions is kind of correct, but it's not the most correct.
Okay, so we have the leaderboard right now. We have Amar still on top, and we have Ankit, and we have Shreya who is third. So we have the next question, which is a technical question.
Oh, that's not loaded properly.
Oh.
Oops, something.
That's moving on. That's loaded properly.
Moving right along.
Moving right along.
Oh, okay. Okay, next question is coming up. So while cloning data to a target instance, what is used to overwrite certain data or records in the target instance? This is the question. So there are records like mid-server configurations, which you don't want to overwrite. Okay, time's up. Oh, okay. The right answer is data preserver.
I think your questions were really hard, Ali. They were really good. But you did not stump Amar. He's still at the top.
Okay. Okay. Yes. So we have the updated leaderboard. We
should
have
note-
Amar.
Amar is my colleague, but I didn't tell him any of these questions or answers ahead of time. So well done, Amar.
Congratulations, Amar.
Yeah.
Well done. That's awesome.
First time I've been able to hold his attention for that long.
Well done, Paul.
So guys, with this, we are done for the day today. A huge thank you for all the participants for taking out your time today. Thank you to our speakers, Jake, Ali, Paul, and a very big thank you to lovely Nicole for managing this for technically an event. Thank you, everyone. We'll be hosting this kind of event every quarter. And please ensure you should follow Enable LinkedIn page to see what will be our next guest and what will be the topic, and join us in the fun. This event, as I said earlier, it aims to provide you, the ServiceNow India community, with insights, informative advice, workshops, and international guests. Don't forget to follow us about the insights, what we are doing new in the market, the latest jobs, and tips and tricks. My name is Kapil Kumar, and I'm the Director of Operations in India. We'll see you next time.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Appreciate your time.
No worries.
Guys, you'll be all the winners will be contacted by Nicole separately for your prizes.
Already done, Kapil.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, Nicole.
Appreciate you sending that over. We'll send you your prize in the post, or in your email, I should say.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome. See you next time.
See ya. Bye.